Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Game Changers for Government Contractors. I've got Gary here with me today, and we're going to be talking about cybersecurity hygiene, which we need to define that right when we get it started here. Before we do that, Gary, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Gary Daemer, and I've been doing cybersecurity for almost 40 years, it feels like. I spent about the first half of my career in the Washington, D.C. Region, supporting some of the three-letter agency company organizations to help build cybersecurity into what they're doing. And we started this whole practice of building cybersecurity into the engineering processes, and not just from a
Hmm.
compliance perspective, but from an engineering perspective. I got a little tired of the hustle and bustle of the Washington D.C. region and wanted to get back to where my wife's roots were and the mountains of North Carolina. So we moved back to Carolina almost 20 years ago, where we started Infusion Points, where we help our customers do the same thing. We build cybersecurity into what they do on a day-to-day basis. We then can help them manage their solution on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. And then we have a security operations center that helps defend their environments as well. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And one of the things we like to say is, hackers never sleep, so why should we? So
Right, right. And they're usually up while we're sleeping in the
yeah,
U.S.,
typically
right?
Friday afternoons at 4 o'clock, we'll start to see the alarm bells go.
Yeah, yeah, they get up and start working and doing their thing, and it's very interesting. I'm up a lot, and so I've seen people try to hack in our websites. Like you said, 4 o'clock in
Oh
the
yeah,
afternoon on a Friday, or it's midnight, 1 o'clock, or 4 a.m. Whatever it is, and you
right.
see them and got to deal with that. So it's just a wild thing, and
And
to be,
especially our customers. I mean, they are defense contractors or folks who,
yeah.
try to protect controlled unclassified information, or they're a cloud service provider trying to sell their services, their SaaS solution or their PaaS solution into the federal government. So this is always one of the first things they think about is this, the cybersecurity compliance that they need to do. So
Yeah, I think a lot of people think, well, I'm always online. They could hit me at any time, but it's just like robbing a house or a bank or anything like that. Why don't you hit them while they're asleep?
right,
Those things
yep.
happen while you're asleep, and that's why you need some sort of defense and some mechanisms in place and things like that. So before we get too deep into the questions here,
Mhm.
the topic today is cybersecurity hygiene. Define that for the audience.
Yeah, so let me just set a few things up first, if it's okay with you,
Yeah.
around that. One of the questions our customers always ask us is, why do I need to put cybersecurity into what we're doing, and why am I a target? And I always like to
Mm,
say, especially for the smaller to mid-sized organizations, well, maybe you're not a target specifically, but the cyber criminals today have solutions that run all the time. So they're always looking for the weakness in the environment. So you could be just a drive-by and they found some weaknesses in your environment by the automated tools that they use. And once they find that drive-by vulnerability, then they really do try to take advantage of that vulnerability within your system. And I think that's one of the main, kind of main factors that we see. So, but truly, with some good cyber hygiene, you can protect yourselves from those drive-bys or nation states. But for the most part, small to mid-sized organizations are really hit by the drive-by folks. But and some of those drive-bys can be from nation states, but at the same time, it really can be very focused on. I'm looking at a whole bunch of different organizations that have this type of software with this type of vulnerability, and that's when they kind of can jump right in and break through those vulnerabilities in the environment. You
yeah.
know, I
Have
think
you?
what
Go
again.
ahead.
I
No, go
was gonna
ahead.
say, I think a lot of it is many organizations that we've talked to, especially this again going back to the small to mid-sized organizations, they don't know what they don't know, and
Hmm.
they're afraid to even ask the questions or not even know how to ask the right question. I think that's a struggle for them, or they think it's somebody else's problem. It's somebody else who is out there that's my managed service provider. It's my cloud provider. It's my nephew who comes in once a week to help me do backups on my systems. You know, it's not really. A lot of people do take kind of the minimum route, right? I'm going to do the minimum thing to truly uh, protect myself. So I have virus malware protection deployed on my system, but I don't look at it. I don't pay attention to the alarms or the alerts, or I don't update it. So you've got to do that kind of minimalistic thing to get you to at least recognize when there's an issue. Now, cyber hygiene itself, to me, really means you really need to do about 7 or 8 things, and those 7 or 8 things is find out where your gaps are. Follow a good, solid security standard like 800 NIST SP 800-171 or 853, or even the cybersecurity framework. If you're doing work in the Department of Defense area, you have to follow NIST SP 800-171. So figure out where your gaps are. Have somebody who knows what they're doing come in and talk you through where you need to be able to secure your environment. So that's probably the first step you need to have. So figure out that that's that gap that you have, and many organizations have large gaps. Um, Protect your network. Have something at that network layer that protects your network, whether you're in the cloud or you're not in the cloud. You're on prem, and your data center is your closet and your factory, and we've seen that multiple times. Have that least privilege, least functionality perspective. What does that mean? Not everybody has root access. Not everybody has admin access. Not everybody has that ability to go in and make changes in your system without having the proper privileges. Because if everybody can change anything, you have no control of your environment. And one of the top areas that people break into networks is because of misconfigurations, because people have too many privileges within the environment. Uh, just simple patch management. Having somebody do regularly patches within the environment will correct many of the vulnerabilities. It'll stop a lot of those drive-bys. The same thing with the configurations, right? If you don't configure your system properly and you're not doing patch management, you're leaving yourself wide open for somebody to come in and do bad things in your environment. Strong passwords. Whenever we do pen test, we leverage weak passwords to get into everybody's environment, and you'll be amazed on how many people don't have strong passwords. So those are some of the main factors to kind of get yourself in a kind of in a good cyber hygiene way. Few other really good methods is training. Uh, Train your people with phishing alarms and phishing testing. Uh, Everybody who works at my company, we laugh about it every now and then because I'm always sending text messages from my iPhone. I don't have an iPhone, but I'm always sending text messages from my iPhone asking for them to go do something for me, and it needs to be done immediately. So that can they give them their phone number, and they'll call right. I'll call them right back to give them the task I want to give them as well. It's so test your employees and train your people as well. And I know a lot of training can be very rote and very boring, so you got to make it a little exciting as well. Having
Yeah.
strong MFA as well, multi-factor authentication. So not just a username and password, but that second factor, hard token or a soft token, will add a lot of value. And then the last thing, really, from a cyber hygiene perspective, is the backup and restore. Always maintain good, solid backups and have the ability to restore them. No good to have a backup if you can't restore, from
Mm.
that backup. I know that was a long laundry list
Yeah.
of things. Uh, Here again, that's why you need that professional to come in and help you out as well. So.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And you mentioned several points there that I'll come back to. One, you mentioned the drive-bys there. It reminds me of the movie I just saw. I don't know if you've seen that movie, The Beekeeper. Have you seen that one yet?
I had not watched it yet. Yeah.
So I reluctantly went and saw that
Mm-hmm.
recently, and I liked it. And part of it was at the very beginning because I think it's a Jason Statham movie. He's going to be beating up
Yep.
and killing a lot of people. It is what it is, and it's fine. But like you've seen it once, you've seen all of them pretty
Right.
much. But what was different about this one is it started off with a cybersecurity incident.
Hmm.
It was the drive by, and so I won't spoil the whole thing for you, but I will spoil a little bit of the front. Is this woman's at home and she's nobody, she's not anybody important, but the hackers got to her laptop, and this happens all the time.
Oh.
They put the little message up. She calls up and they're like, "Hey, you just for $100, we'll clean this right away." And she gives them access to her stuff. And what she winds up being is she has access to a nonprofit's bank accounts worth
Mm.
like $3 million or whatever it is. And so she didn't have a lot, but she had access on her system to a
Yep.
lot. And that's what people don't realize is, well, why does the janitor, need, cybersecurity at the company that just does janitorial work? Why do they need that? Well, are they doing work at one of the 3-letter agencies? Are
Mm-hmm.
they doing work for the DoD? Do they have addresses to buildings that don't appear on Google Maps? Do they
Mm-hmm.
have access to other things? Because the thing is, all of their information is in sam.gov. And I know there's an API to the back end of sam.gov where a hacker could be getting updates on addresses and contact information and contracts every single day, all day long. And oh, hey, there's a new contract here, and this company doesn't list this or that, or it says State Department, or it says whatever. Like, where is this at? And let's go after this company. And so as an analyst, which is how I was trained in the military, you start looking for, well, how do you find all of those little bits to the puzzle that are not easily accessible? Like, it's not easily accessible to find that address for that building. But if there's certain contractors that are working in this space, you can start to work the puzzle backwards, right? And break it down. And so
Absolutely. Yep.
people don't think about those kind of things. Or as simple as you've got a retired person who's been working at small companies all their life, doesn't have a whole lot to their savings, but maybe it's a few $100,000, and now this person can get in and get access to their savings account. But like the lady in the movie, they're also serving on a nonprofit board as the
Mm.
treasurer, as the person running their QuickBooks. In one of the nonprofits we ran years ago, one of the ladies who did our accounting was a retired executive for a big corporation in the region, and she had access to our bank accounts. She had access to our QuickBooks. She could transfer money. She could do all that. She could do more stuff than I could do for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so, and she had to come on site to do a lot of that. But then we went to the cloud, and she could do it from home. And
Right.
so, one mistake, and now somebody's got access to all those checking accounts and savings accounts and different things like that. So I think people don't realize that, oh, well, I'm not that important. Well, you could be, you just don't know it.
And that's the reason why Department of Defense, had the new DFARS rules and the CMMC rules that came out that said you had to follow these standards and you had to meet these requirements in order to be able to do business and for the Department of Defense. And we're starting to see a little bit of this also in the civil side as well, is that you got to protect that data at a certain level and to be able to do business because of that very reason that you're describing right there. In a lot of cases, it's not just the prime contractors who have that data that is controlled but unclassified. It is the subcontractors, and those
Mhm.
subcontractors may not have as you know may not be as diligent about protecting their data as the prime contractor because I'm not a target, right?
Right.
But now it's actually a contractual requirement that you've got to be meeting these standards based on the level of data that you have in your environment. So,
Yeah. It's just so important, and people don't realize it. And when I'm thinking about this, the personal aspect of it, the training that you were talking about and testing your people, to me is one of the most important parts. I can't tell you how many stories that I can tell you from, again, it was a city we lived in prior to here where
mm,
we were really plugged in. We knew the police chief. We had him on, our cell phones, and we knew this person at the city and that person at the county and this person at the hospital. And we would hear these wild stories of even, real quick, this one about the hospital that was in our region. I think they had been scammed in this one particular month for almost $300,000, where somebody was actually sending the hospital, which is ironic when you see how hospitals send invoices to people all the time that you don't expect, right? But they were sending invoices to the accounts payable, and the hospital was paying them.
oh yeah,
And the hospital was just paying them to the tune of $300,000. And then, but then once they got in with the hospital, what they did was they found a way through that to get access to patient records and information, to then start going to the patients and saying, hey, you've got a $70,000, $80,000 bill here that's out, 90
Mm-hmm.
days past due that you haven't paid. And people are like, oh my gosh, I forgot about I thought I paid that. And hey, we're going to go, do collections on you if you don't start paying. And now they're scamming the other people. So it started with one, it reversed its way to the other people, and they're making millions of dollars off of this little bitty town in the middle of nowhere in Illinois. Right.
Yep.
So it doesn't have to be in the big city. It doesn't have to be somebody with millions of dollars. It really just has to be worth their time to go after it. And so it's the people side. And so for me, that's one of those things that I think is really important, is the training of people, because you can have all the systems, but if somebody just gives a password or
Yep.
gives a login or whatever, then all the systems in the world aren't going to help when you do that. So
Well, so let me expand that just one little bit further. Is it's not just the kind of extortion, in my opinion, because that's kind of what that is, right? A little bit of that, and it's not just from the scamming perspective, but with ransomware, and they're encrypting your data. So they're encrypting your data, and then they're saying, "Pay me $27 million because I have your data." And oh, yeah, by the way, if you don't pay me that money, I'm not going to give you the key to unencrypt that data. And guess what? I have your data and I'm going to release it if you don't
hmm,
pay me.
hmm,
Right. So, I mean, we see that quite often out there.
yeah,
Some of the worst days that we have with a customer, especially a new customer, is when they come to us and say, I think I've been hacked. Can you help me out?
hmm,
Um, and it's hard for a small business to recover from those.
yeah.
We see millions of events every single day in the customers that we watch. We have a monitoring service that we watch these events and millions of events every single day.
Yeah, it's definitely scary. And, I think for the average person, the first time you get one of those weird emails is probably one of the scariest moments. Because after you've gotten them for a while, you're like, oh, I'm on a list somewhere, and they're randomly emailing people,
Yep.
and it's the same message over and over. But I had one of those that I got in my inbox that I'd never seen before. It was a couple of years ago, and it was, we've been screen recording your computer and this and that, and I was just like, it just felt so authentic in one way,
Right.
because they had a password that had been hacked from somewhere that
Mm-hmm.
I'd used, but I was like, I know I wasn't on that website, and I
Right.
know I didn't do this, and I didn't do that. I know I didn't, but how did they get my email and my password? Just, a password that we commonly use, which we don't commonly use passwords anymore,
No, you
which
shouldn't. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I want to get
Yeah.
into the tools here in a minute, and
Okay.
have you talk passwords. But I think the first time you see something like that is where it scares you, and you're like, even though deep down you didn't do the thing they're saying in the email, you're still scared, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't know, because they have enough information. It's almost like going to a psychic. They have
Yep.
enough information to start pushing you down a path,
Yep.
and if they can push you hard enough, they're going to get you. And
Agree.
that's the thing. And so, talk to me. Let's go down the password rabbit hole a little bit. There's tools like LastPass and several other ones that are out there. LastPass got hacked last year, maybe twice, I think, and I think that scared a lot of people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When it comes to passwords and tools like that, do you make a recommendation to use a certain, not necessarily a certain product, but to have something like that? Or are you guys in the camp of, pound away on your keyboard, just randomly to come up with them? Like, what are your thoughts on, like, having that unique password and things like that?
I think it depends on what you're protecting. So I'll start there, right? So
Mm,
if say you're a CEO of a company, like me, and I might have access to a few things, but I don't have access to everything. So having a strategy for that least privilege piece and at least functionality, that's where you got to start. So you might not need to have a fully 26 character password that's totally randomized with special characters and uppercase, lowercase, and numbers, for your everyday login. Because if you can't remember it, you're never going to log into it, right? So,
mm,
I highly recommend having a strong 16 character password, at least at a minimal. Um, have a part of it randomized, have a part of it that's memorized, and have a part of it that's randomized. Um, Build a pattern that works for you for logins, but always make sure that it's uppercase, it's lowercase, and you have special characters in it, and something that you can really remember. Now, um, if you can't remember it, I suggest using your little yellow notepad, right? And you stick it on your keyboard. I'm only kidding. No, not really. We use products. We use products like KeyPass. It's a free tool for storing passwords. A password like or a system like LastPass is good. You just got to do you due diligence on the one that you choose. We actually use a cloud service inside of AWS called Secrets Manager or Pass Parameter Store, where we store a lot of our kind of corporate stuff. Because some of those are 26 character long. They're not, no way in the world you could ever remember them. And it would take a lifetime to be able to break into them.
Hmm.
So with stuff you need to remember, build a pattern, passphrases. You know, I like to drive down the road at 56 miles an hour on Route 53. Make that into a password,
Hmm.
right? Doesn't have to be I drive down the road at 50 miles an hour on Route 53. You kind of condense it, but don't use commonly exchanged, letters for characters. Like I know you're going to change an A for an at. I know you're going to do a one and a bang. I know you're going to do, a pound for four, as an example.
Hmm.
So build a pattern that works for you. Memorize that pattern, and it'll really save you on a lot. It's probably the number one recommendation that we make to every small to mid-sized organization: stronger passwords, and then wherever you can, add two-factor authentication.
Hmm.
So have that two-factor authentication because it
Yeah.
gives something your password, and something you have, which is your two-factor authentication. You can take it one step further if they offer biometrics, which is something you are. Your fingerprint, your eye print, your voice print, your face. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, those are really good. And would you say that that's really the first, if I'm going to implement a tool in my organization, it's
strong
something that's going to
passwords is the number one
use
thing.
stronger.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is. Um, and then the second is patch management, vulnerability management, right? So making sure that you're up to date and you have the systems they're patched to the appropriate level they need to be. Most hacks many hacks happen on systems that are vulnerable, and some of these vulnerabilities have had fixes to them for 15 years.
Hmm.
So it's the truth, and then misconfigurations. Those, if you could fix those three things, you'll stop a lot. I think the idea in a lot of cases is you can't stop everything because somebody's going to find a way in one way or another if they're really determined to get in, especially if it's a
Right.
nation state. But if you can stop those drive-bys, if you can stop yourself from being a target, I think that's your biggest and best way. You can get into more detailed solutions, with making sure that you have very, very good virus protection. Malware, they actually call it now XDR, which is more of the ability not only to detect it but stop it, and then be able to add an extra layer on top of that is having a monitoring or a managed service provider or a managed security service provider then manage that for you. So if something does happen at 2 o'clock in the middle of the night, which I'm going to tell you, it happens a lot, um, you give your MSP or MSSP the ability to stop it in its tracks.
Hmm.
It happens for us quite often, so.
Yeah. No, that's really good. And I would say, when it comes to the patch management side, people think it's just the stuff that's on their computer. Think about the stuff on your website too.
Right.
If you're using WordPress like 90% of the world is at this point, you probably have more than 5 or 10 plugins on your
Yep.
on the back of your website. And those things are getting updated all the time. And almost every time when I read the updates, because I'm the geeky guy that goes through and looks at the updates, see if it's going to break anything, it'll say security vulnerability. Like it's almost always one of the things that's
Yep.
in there. We had an issue years ago where it was one plugin, and we narrowed it down and figured out, oh, it's this particular plugin, and it has a history of this, and that's how people are starting to come at the site. But the one that helped us the most stop people from attacking us was actually on the firewall of shutting down every
Right. Oh
country.
yeah. Oh
We
yeah.
literally shut down
Yep.
everything, and they were like US only. And then we started, okay, we have a client that wants to get in. Okay, we'll let
You
that
whitelist them.
country, and okay,
You
we'll let
whitelist
this
them.
one, or
Yep.
yeah, or by IP
Yep.
address, or however we, did it, because it's like, hey, we don't need access to the whole
Yeah.
world,
Especially if
and
you're
that
doing
fixed it.
this,
So,
if you're doing this
um,
type of work like you do and like we do, right? My customers are government contractors. Your customers are government contractors for the most part. I'm sure. Um,
yeah,
so I don't need to have somebody from Europe or somebody from Africa or Asia, logging into my systems. Matter of fact, a lot of the work that we do
we
don't
do,
even
but
allow that, right? So if you're out of country, you can't do the
yeah,
work anyway. So we shut people's systems down if they travel out of country. So
yeah, yeah.
that's a
So
whole
it's
nother
a
level.
simple fix
So,
that yeah, that's a whole other level, but it's a
right.
simple fix. So, last question there for you on this whole topic here is: are there any things out there that are, what you see as overhyped, or gimmicks, or things that seem like to the public like, hey, this is the fix, that you have looked at and said this is really more of a gimmick and it's just not very effective?
I think there are a lot of people out there that try to sell fear, uncertainty, and doubt. There is no servable to anything that we do. So I don't think there's any single thing that I would say is a tool out there that is overhyped. Um, it's just being aware of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I think that's one of the biggest thing.
Hmm.
Not be too afraid, but be
Yeah.
afraid enough that you take some action.
Yeah, I think that's important. Not
Right.
be too afraid. So, yeah, because it's easy to be
Oh
really
yes.
afraid of everything going on. Yeah, and all the articles and things that are out there. But if I had to come back to two things, you gave us a lot of really good ones in there. But two things: the user training, and that ties into the
Yes.
password side. Like the user training, I just can't stress the user training. And for me, it's not about a certain
Mm-hmm.
age group, because I think some people are like, oh, well, it's the older users. No, sometimes those are the
Mm-hmm.
wisest users on the team. I've seen people that were in their teens, their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, 60s, 70s. I've seen silly things, I'll just put it that way, at every level of every range. And it's just one of those things where it doesn't matter who you are, you need to be trained. When I come across something that happens, one of the first things I do is tell my wife and kids, hey, just so you know, this is a scam, and just making people aware of what's going on. I tell our coaches, hey, just so you know, this is a scam. I tell our clients, hey, this is a scam. Be aware, because the more people know about the scam, the easier it is for people to just not, get involved with it. So, it's in my opinion. So good stuff, Gary. Thanks for
Absolutely.
coming on and talking about this. As a part 2 to this, everybody, we're going to be talking about FedRAMP. So stay tuned for that one. You'll be able to catch that episode in a
Thank you
future
very
date.
much. I appreciate it.